to our special symposium titled Childcare Symposium, Practices, Policies, and Strategies to Move Utah Forward. I'm Dr. Susan Madsen, Founding Director of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, and also the Karen Haight Huntsman Endowed Professor of Leadership in the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University. And I'm the host and will be the moderator today. This event furthers the mission of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, which is to strengthen the impact of Utah girls and women. We serve Utah and its residents first by producing relevant, trustworthy, and applicable research. Second, creating and gathering valuable resources. And third, convening trainings and events that inform, inspire, and ignite growth and change for all Utahns. And I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsors, the Utah Education Network, UEN, the John M. Huntsman School of Business, and USU Extension for making this event possible. So you are welcome to put questions into the Q&A in Zoom throughout the event today. And you can also put some comments for us as panelists to see in the chat as well. And we'll try and address those as we go along today. We hope to have about 10 minutes at the end to look at a couple of other questions maybe we hadn't gotten to. So we have 3 panels today. So I want to jump right in and get us moving along. The first panel is titled, Childcare is a Business Issue. And my co-moderator for this panel will be Nubia Peña, who is the Director for the Utah Division of Multicultural Affairs and Senior Advisor on Equity and Opportunity for Governor Cox. Welcome, Nubia. And will you introduce our 3 panelists today?
Absolutely. And thank you so very much for the kind invitation to join you as co-moderator today. It's an exciting conversation and I look forward to diving in. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panelists. So Dave Nielsen is Overstock's president, leading the company's marketing algorithms, customer, digital, technology, sourcing, and operations organizations. Thank you, Dave, for being with us. David Alsop. Yes, thank you, sir. David Alsop is the Vice President of Human Resources and People Strategy, head for Ultradent Products, Inc. He works in the broader community to advance the human experience as the founder of Disrupt HR, Salt Lake City, and JumpSpark LLC. Thank you, David, for joining. And then we do have Heather Kirkby, as she has served as Recursion's Chief People Officer since May 2019. She joined Recursion after 15 years at Intuit and has a background in mechanical engineering, product management, and talent development. Thank you, Heather, for joining. All right, so just to start us off, as Dr. Madsen mentioned, we don't have a lot of time and we will have a lot of questions to get through. I'd like to invite each of you to share with us, why is providing childcare benefits an issue that business leaders should be prioritizing? And so I'll begin with Dave Nielsen, followed by Heather and David Alsop. Thank you.
Thanks, Nubia. So let me make this perfectly clear. Childcare is not a family issue. It is a business issue. We need to build childcare infrastructure that is needed to help working parents keep working for their families and for the economy as a whole. If working parent is with a company that doesn't have a family-friendly policy and amenities, the employee will quickly feel burned out, stressed, resentment for missing meaningful moments. They may decide as a family that they cannot coexist with work and family and all of those involved. Working parents need bonding time. They need access to childcare. They need access to healthcare and flexibility. 70% of mothers work. Nearly 7% of fathers stay home to take care of the children, and 34% of children are now raised by a single parent. Women are becoming mothers later in life. So entry-level parents are farther along in their careers, which creates a devastating impact to this diverse pipeline of talent that we need to retain in our businesses. I would just add one other maybe point here, that family-friendly benefits can help employers support a more inclusive and diverse workplace, critical to attracting and retaining talent today and tomorrow. Family-friendly benefits can help companies improve gender diversity and demonstrate that they value women's contributions in the workplace. Right now, unemployment in Utah is 2.1%. Yikes. Competition for talent is high. If employers aren't addressing the needs of such a large portion of the workforce, they'll quickly be surpassed by the competition.
Excellent. Thank you so very much, Dave. Heather, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thanks, Nubia. And Dave, I'm just going to double down on your headline. It's a business issue. This is not a family issue, right? The people you want to hire, the people that are working for you, they're struggling, and they're struggling because there's a policy issue and there's a societal issue related to childcare. It's a gap and it's a problem. One of the data points I quote is from 2017 in Utah. For every 4 children that needed care, there was 1 spot available. Right? The parents of these children are the people you want to hire, and they're the people that are working for you. So it's just a blocker for parents fully participating in the workforce. So that's a big one. And Dave named the other big thing. If you stand up and say diversity matters to your company, that diversity and inclusion is something that's important, then you have to think about all the barriers to diverse and underrepresented talent. And this is just a massive barrier and a blocker. And at the end of the day, diversity is going to be one of the levers that helps you achieve your mission, right? All the research is out there that homogenous teams simply underperform diverse teams. So it's a business issue.
Heather, you're speaking to my heart. You already know the Senior Advisor of Equity and Opportunity. So you're all mentioning the right things. We have to look at policies, and we really have to think about diversifying our workforce. So thank you, Heather and Dave. David, how about you? What would you like to share?
Yeah, I think the main things that I could add, to me, it's childcare is a human experience. And we have humans working for our companies that if we don't connect to their hearts, their lives, and support those lives, they won't give their hearts to us. And so first and foremost, we have to acknowledge that the human experience is different for every single individual. And companies that don't understand that and don't diversify their understanding of so many different experiences, they leave out these experiences like the parental experience. And so thinking about our companies as humans, and our companies need humans to be successful. That's the only way we succeed. We have to look at it that way. The other thing I would say is the Great Resignation. It is very specifically, the research is showing people are leaving companies that do not find the flexibility and the support to connect with the desires of their employees. And the majority of employees are in a childcare experience or even daycare or elderly care experiences. And so we have to look at it and understand that there's a human that is working for us that has a life, and they want to deliver results for us. But if we don't look at their lives and we don't support their lives, they will not deliver their successes for us. They will fight against us and leave us. And so if businesses in Utah aren't looking at that, they are going to lose out. And coming from the outside of Utah, in the past 5 years, I never had to talk about daycare more than I've had to talk about here in Utah.
Oh.
We are behind. Where I came from in the Midwest, I didn't have to talk to mothers about could they find daycare, and fathers, could they get the support they needed at home. But here we are looking at it way behind the other markets that have been ahead of on this. And if we don't catch up, we're going to lose people to outside of Utah.
Thank you. I'll jump in with the next question. I do have to say it's been interesting the last couple of weeks because my daughter graduated with her RN, and I have this delightful little almost 3-year-old granddaughter. And my daughter's been stressing on childcare. And I'm like, I'm in these conversations all the time. So here's my next question. I invited all 3 of you because your companies have been either exploring options, looking at what's right for you, or implemented options, and benefits for childcare can range a lot of different. It's not just one experience. I would love to see what you're doing at your company. What have you explored? And give our listeners some more of that detail. So Heather, I'll have you start on this one.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. And actually, I'm going to pull a thread straight from where David finished, which is, our company, so Recursion, is a tech-enabled drug discovery company. And we wanted to attract the best and the brightest from Utah and the country, and knew that in order to attract and retain that talent to Utah, we needed to solve the childcare problem ourselves, because the availability simply wasn't there for our employees. So we made the decision to partner with Bright Horizons. And actually, we committed when the company was a Series B startup. And I put that out there to challenge others to say, you might think you have to wait until you're big to do these things. And I would simply challenge those assumptions. So as a startup, we committed to opening our own on-site childcare center, did that in the summer of 2021, specifically to attract and retain diverse talent in Salt Lake City, where we've been proudly founded. But we knew that was a problem that, to David's point, our humans were going to have to overcome, and we had to be part of the solution.
Thank you so much. Dave, I'll have you jump in next.
Well, just like Heather mentioned, we know that when you have peace of mind, knowing that your children are close and safe and receiving quality care, you're going to be a more productive employee, and you're going to be an employee that wants to work for that organization. And it's a real challenge. That is one of the many things that we have implemented is on-site childcare. We implemented it in 2017. And we opened the childcare facility on our campus. It accommodates about 48 children. And it strengthened our ability to recruit talent. Sometimes just specific talent that is needed, that's out of state, as David and Heather have both mentioned. You're competing against the entire country, not just Utah anymore for these services. We also provide a caregiver travel policy. And what that means is if an employee is traveling to work, for work, the company will pay for the child care professional or parent to travel with the employee. Since introducing this policy to the organization, it's been wildly talked about by our employees. Why is it such a hit? Because once again, it signals to our employees that we care about the time they have as a family together, and we value them as an employee. We also have established an on-site medical clinic. Parents want access to healthcare, and they want to be able to have something close and easy to get to take their children to. So even if you're not a part of the daycare, you can take your child to the on-site healthcare. Makes it much quicker and easier and convenient. And I would say one of the last things that we implemented is called 980. And basically what 980 is you've got to get your oil changed. You've got to go pick up the cleaners. You got whatever it may be that you have, those things that the businesses just aren't open between before 9 a.m. or after 5 p.m. So 980 is basically packing 80 hours into 9 days. So every other Friday, employees have off, and we stagger that between two different groups. So we always have coverage in our building and with our employees, but they're allowed a day off. And that seems to be something that also helps give flexibility to parents with their childcare.
Thank you so much. And David, your company, Ultradent, is fairly early in the exploration, correct? And haven't you looked at a variety of options?
Yes. Yeah, I think we're a good example where, as Dave talks, you have an established company that's got more resources than many of us that are still in that growth phase of our company. And so we have to look at a lot of different things. I would say the things we're looking at, and then secondarily, I'll share some things that we're currently doing. We are looking at and partnering with UC3 and Paige Checketts and her organization to really look at it differently as far as our sales grow and we're able to afford the right things. It really is for us about how do we get daycare from the outskirts of the valley closer to where our employees are, and how do we support them with stipends in the future to be able to offset the high cost of quality daycare. And so we're working on that right now. We're looking at options over the next 3 to 5 years to not necessarily become a childcare provider, but work with someone where we might be able to provide land or rent space to a childcare provider that simply wants to get closer to the businesses that we are in the center of the valley. And so that's something we're looking at. The things that we currently do and we're working on consistently, first and foremost, we put a high investment in our leadership development and also the employees and how they partner with their leaders, because no matter what policies we put in place for a large organization, if we don't have leaders and employees that are partnering together for success at work and at home, they're not going to be able to find the right times and the right places to support. And so as we get that right, we're seeing our leaders partner and find the maximum flexibility in the job for the employee without losing the maximum success in delivering results so they can get done what they need to get done outside of work. And so we've seen examples where managers have come to us and asked if they can do shifts that are alternative to a regular schedule. In our manufacturing operations, it can be harder for people to be able to get home and stay home where other positions can be remote. And so we have a wide range of opportunities that have been optioned up through our management ranks that we fully support. Because what we find is when we can flex and find that flexibility, employees are able to get their things done that they need to get done in life. And they can also find the right way to get things done here at work as they do that. So that partnership is key. And I think the other things that I would add are inclusion and diversity. If we aren't talking about it, we aren't going to have leaders and employees and a culture that knows how to seek out and understand when there's a need in place. There's a lot of fear. I hired an employee this year where she was just grateful that we hired her during her pregnancy. And she said she ran into organizations when she was applying that wouldn't hire her because they wanted to wait until her pregnancy was over. And so there's a need to understand the differences and put a high emphasis on education in inclusion because of the biases that exist from people's experiences in life. One other thing I'd share is we have been implementing this year what we call medical time off, where we allow employees to build up a fund of time that when they're planning for life events or they're having an experience that's related to medical needs, especially for pregnancy and delivery of a baby. We implemented that this year and we're getting great success out of employees really investing that time and us supporting that time to be able to get away when they need to get away for those things. So anytime we can build that relationship locally with the employee, we're able to find the right ways to support. And that's the most important thing I would say for growing organizations is don't think you can't do something. Listen to your employees, listen to your leaders, and make sure they're partnering the right way to give the feedback to flex where you need to.
Thank you so much.
And David, actually, that's a phenomenal transition into our next question, because you three are already in the process. You've done some of the foundational work. You've got these services available for your teams. But we have some business partners that are on the call right now that are wondering, how can we offer this? Where do we get started? So what are the lessons learned through the journey that you would like to share so that for those that are interested in being able to provide this critical resource to their employees, they can start taking those next steps? So Dave, I'll start with you, followed by Heather and David.
Thanks, Nubia. I would say lean on third-party childcare providers to operate your facility. It's best to leave childcare to those whom it's a core competency of. For us, we've learned that contracting a daycare organization has several benefits. They've passed the background checks and managing the inspections is all done by them. They have needed licenses and permits. They carry their own liability insurance. Some businesses might perceive complexity around building and running on-site childcare and not investigate further, but it is absolutely the best thing to outsource. There's different models for an on-site childcare facility that allow companies flexibility based on their needs. You can build out and run the facility yourself, or build it out and outsource it. You can outsource it to childcare operations to a third party or a daycare facility to operate on-site. A company can negotiate an employee rate with an established daycare in the community as well. That's another way to go about it if you don't want to stand it up yourself. And the company might also coordinate a vetted list of childcare providers in the community just to make that present and have access to it. And you can also offer childcare subsidies. There is a return on this investment. This is a huge concern for many companies that have an incorrect perception that operating costs would continue to hurt for many years. I'll tell you, with Overstock, even through the pandemic, we had initially closed the daycare, and we had a lot of our employees ask us if we could open that back up for different needs that they had, whether it was the living space or the workspace, or they wanted to come back into the office for whatever benefit for them. And our CEO and I didn't blink at it. We opened the daycare up, and if you look at the daycare on its own, maybe it is a challenge, but in this what both Heather and David have mentioned in this great resignation. You need every benefit you can find, and it is worth it to keep these facilities open, to show your employees how much you appreciate them and respect what they're also trying to accomplish.
Thank you so very much, Dave. I appreciate that. And you're the second individual that's mentioned the Great Resignation. And I know that Dr. Madsen has talked often about the pink recession, right? And what COVID-19 created for women having to leave because they had to balance being a mother, being a teacher, right? So thank you so much for continuing to mention this. So Heather, thoughts, how can we inspire folks to get engaged in this effort?
Yeah, happy to share, and obviously in the context of having created an on-site daycare and childcare in our case, and I would echo Dave's comments. If you're going to go down that route, you want to partner with the best. In our case, we partner with Bright Horizons, and I think incredibly highly of them. I did before the pandemic. We'd already decided to partner with them. They were tremendous partners helping us navigate the pandemic in the context of the childcare and making decisions and keeping that space safe for children. So partner with the best if you're going to do it. The next thing I would say is, for us, it was really helpful to have commitment from the top. So really from the CEO, who had even aligned with the board on the investment. And if you're trying to influence inside your own company, my suggestion would be maybe have your CEO talk to another CEO who's taken this step and sort of hear from a peer in their own words, the impact it had on the company. Because I will guarantee you, any CEO who's made this decision really is going to have positive things to say about what it has done to their culture and their company and their ability to hire and retain talent. So that's one suggestion I had. I think the other big learnings for me, I'm going to put under the bucket of surprises, Nubia. And one was, I've been so amazed at how the childcare has become the most visible manifestation of our culture, who we are and what we stand for as a company. Culture is so amorphous. It's made up of so many things, big and small, visible, invisible, tangible, intangible. But a childcare center is a very visible thing. And people talk to me about it all the time and say and express how it represents to them what recursion stands for, because we did it. And that was a big surprise for me. The other surprise for me, which honestly shouldn't have been a surprise, my kids are 7 and 11. I describe the years of them being under 5 and me working as the chaos years. Like, it was an unsolvable equation. And yet for 5+ years, I tried to solve it. It was mayhem. And what the surprise for me, I did not have access to on-site childcare during those years. It was really hard. The surprise to me was talking to our employees and hearing in their own words how this facility has affected their lives and their family's life. And I should have known that, but it was until they said it to me that it really profoundly made me realize our comms team had gathered some quotes for some activity and I started reading them, and it was during the pandemic, and I was alone in front of my computer, and I just started crying, right? And it's the things like saving an hour of commuting, shuttling kids around to childcare. It's that peace of mind that you can just walk next door and check on your child. It's that, just all of the flexibility and benefit that comes with having something like that, knowing that you're not sitting there with on 3 wait lists because you don't know if your kid's going to get in and can you afford a nanny. Like, it is like struggle layered on struggle layered on struggle trying to figure out childcare as a working parent. And so those were big surprises for me, and learnings and delights, frankly, from the experience of having offered it to our people.
Thank you, Heather. Can I just tell you, I started to get teary-eyed. I'm just like, the human experience, right? That's what the 3 of you keep talking about. It's like,
So
these
hard.
are humans. They're human beings that are coming in and giving to us value. And so we should make sure that we're seeing the benefits. So thank you for making sure we don't forget the heart story here. So David, tell us more. How can we recommend folks get started and engaged in this discussion?
I think first, recognizing if you're not having the discussion, you got a diversity issue on your leadership. And so finding ways to ensure you're developing diversity up through your organization, hiring diversity into your organization, and making sure your executive team has diverse perspectives on that team. There's smaller organizations that it's really hard to find that talent, but there are diverse individuals that are here to help. You can get a perspective, you can pay for it outside, but make sure you have diverse perspectives, because it really is, as we've had those diverse perspectives grow into our leadership, the passion has grown, and it hasn't been a passing conversation that I think a lot of organizations struggle, that they just get the HR person coming in and people aren't always listening to the HR person. But when you have diversity talking about it, and you have individuals on the leadership across the board talking about it, change does happen. I think the other thing to think about is I've heard a lot of leaders, I've heard a lot of people in my network excited to go back to the way it was before COVID with remote work, meaning let's get back to our buildings, let's get back to our sites and sit in our seats. And if there's anybody thinking about that, talking about that, that is the wrong direction to take, because we have learned that we can support parents in a remote world where they don't have if they have a computer, that means a lot of times they can work from home. And if we think the only way to engage and have a culture is on site, there's ways that you can develop a culture to be remote, to be hybrid, and finding ways to support parents during the phases of their life where they need to be at home more than they need to be at work. So don't go back in time on the remote work that we've learned in the pandemic. I think the only other thing I'd share is we originally thought that we had to be the provider. And I think it was said earlier that don't be the provider, find the provider. And so for us, we've realized that if we focus more on providing stipends or finding ways to provide stipends to offset the cost, which is very high for quality daycare, and then find the right partnership. We have looked at Bright Horizons. We decided to go with UC3 with their local ties. And that expertise is bringing us the understanding that there's providers that will move closer to you if you'll just support your employees. And so one idea that's been thrown around in our brainstorm sessions is treat your benefits like 401k like a menu. If you have a 401k, that means you have budget, that you could have a match that's going towards that. Could you offer that as a menu for the 5 years that it's needed for an employee to offset their retirement to pay for daycare? There's a lot of different ways you can offset costs to pay for stipends and support, but don't think your investment needs to be the provider. Think more about how you can invest in your employees to afford the provider to have quality daycare. Because if you don't do that, there are a lot of providers that are not high quality, and that puts really the benefit at risk in what you provide to your employees. So I think those are the three things I would offer up on top of what's already been talked about.
Thank you so much. A couple of quick observations. One thing, you're all really supporting some things that I've been thinking through the years in terms of in Utah, a lot of through the years, we look at this as a private issue instead of a public issue. And I think that transition is just barely starting in the last year or so. And then the second one, and Marin, who will join us in a little bit, has put a couple of handouts that we've put over in the chat. The second one is that I've noticed employers look at it all or nothing. Let's do nothing, or let's do all on-site childcare and figure it out ourselves. But there really is a continuum of options. So we'd like to, Nubia noted that there are, I haven't been watching the chat very well, but have you three been looking in the chat? Or Nubia, do you have a question to throw in from the chat? Anybody want to jump in and answer a quick question from our chat?
I do just want to acknowledge that there are folks that are validating the comments that are coming through. I actually just got a text from a dear friend who is on who has joined us. And she just said, David, thank you for your comment. If you're not talking about childcare, you have a diversity problem in your leadership. So you got 2 snaps for that. And then someone else said that there is always a huge return on investment when you invest in quality early childhood experiences. So again, just validating, affirming, and saying thank you for your courage and being able to amplify this conversation. So we do have a couple of questions. So Haley asks, have any of the employers here stumbled into staffing shortages within childcare? Even with the subsidies some employees report they can't find any available provider. The low wages in childcare seem to be a statewide and national issue. Wondering about just how much businesses can fix on their own and what else policymakers need to do to help with this. So who'd like to answer that?
Nubia, I can start it out and then I'd love to hear the other perspectives. So my background, I grew up in Utah and then I moved away from my career and then decided after about 14 years, I wanted to move back. And the thing that I've heard constantly is that our legislature is not looking at it. They're not diversified in the same way we need to have diverse leadership teams. So one thing that we can all do is really look at the candidates that are wanting to be in the legislature of our state and voting for candidates that understand the diversity challenges, not of our past, but of our future. That can help a lot with the quality of daycare and the cost of it. I do think the shortage, we haven't seen it yet, but we are hearing it's a challenge with the provider that we're partnering with in the future. And so it does cause the dynamic where there's a high cost to daycare. And that's where the company really needs to think about how we can offset that and then support that. But it is a challenge in this environment where the Great Resignation affects everybody. And so we need to be able to have policies, we need to have programs, and we need to have support systems that allow the daycare providers to spend more money on their investment in the quality of employees and less on just getting up and running.
Let's actually, any other questions, instead of having all three of you answer the same question, to grab a couple of other questions? If not, I've got a burning question for you.
There's another one. It was more of a comment, but I think also something that potentially as business leaders, you may be able to think through some strategies on how we address. She says, or they say, I'm sorry, early childhood programs are often small businesses for women, but the low wages, lack of respect, and lack of support from many employers are challenges that we're still trying to overcome. So as business leaders, is there anything that you could potentially think of we can do to amplify this concern so that we can address it together?
Heather or Dave, do you want to jump in on that one?
I'm just rereading the question here with the line. I mean, I'll double down on David's comment. The issues described here feel like policy and legislative issues, right? Like, I mean, the thread I pull in as an employer is I agree. Like, and I think employers have a responsibility actually to establish what is a minimum livable wage, not based on some calculator, but based on actually what, and we did that. In fact, we just recently updated our minimum, our company's perspective on minimum livable wage and pay employees correspondingly. I think companies can be thoughtful in how you choose vendors along these lines. Who do you choose to partner with? Are they committed to diversity and inclusion? Are they committed to paying their people well? You can cast a shadow or you can create a halo based on, you know, how you lead and who you choose to work with. And that was part of our, I guess, strategy, I would say, in choosing Bright Horizons. To the prior question, we've had no issues with staffing. Bright Horizons is it rises right to the top of those great place to work lists. It's an incredible employer. So be thoughtful about who you partner with, not just for childcare, but vendors across the board.
I wanted to jump in too and just mention that there's not that many business leaders that jump in when it crosses over into legislation. There's business leaders often just kind of do their own thing, and only certain do, but business leaders can have a big impact. I just want to say it, it's not a question, but business leaders can have a big impact on public policy.
Yeah.
Susan,
I'm going to jump in, Nubia. There's an important question that's come up in Slack chat a couple times, which is how do you influence people to do something in this space? And I'm going to say you need to win hearts and minds. And the way you win minds is with data. The way you win hearts is with stories. I'll throw out a data point, you know, in this last comment from Kristen, like, how do you convince a company that this is directly related to work? It goes back to where Dave started us, right? This is a business issue, not a family issue. 83% of millennials are going to switch jobs for family-friendly benefits. Like marinate in that. An entire generation, 83% of an entire generation is going to leave you or join you based on, so that's data heart. If you're trying to influence within your own company, get people to fall in love with the problem. Have the exec team go talk to parents of young children. Ask those employees, what's hard? What could we as a company change so that you could have more impact at our company? And listen to them. And all of a sudden it becomes a business problem. So
thank you, Dave. I'm looking at the time and we just have a few minutes left. It's been such a great discussion. But Dave, just a quick question. Your business, you are three that are getting this, right? But we do need to support the community and other families to get other businesses on board. Couple of thoughts, Dave?
Yeah, I think they need to, Heather hit the nail on the head. Other businesses need to understand in their hearts and in their minds the value of what this can bring to them. There is a workforce out there to be tapped, but that workforce has to be treated with respect and love. They have to know that you want them to come and work with you and be a part of what you're creating, and that you're going to create for them an environment where they can still be fully valued internally. They don't go home at night thinking, oh, I'm burning the candle at both ends. My family is missing out on opportunities. I'm missing out on time with them. We have to, as businesses, we have to recognize it is in 2.1% unemployment. It is darn near impossible to keep your employee base happy. There are many opportunities for them. If businesses don't get on board, I don't know how they won't survive. They won't survive long-term as we continue to expand. And with COVID and the remote work, it has given employees much more flexibility and much more opportunity to look and not have to move their families. So it's almost heightened the reason for businesses to wake up and get involved in both public policy as well as championing it with themselves. I know with our CEO, I will tell you, when it comes to our chief people officer and issues with costs and challenges with budgets on anything with our daycare, with healthcare, with employee benefits, we actually this year, we're so proud to be able to pass along a 0% increase for all of the benefits we're offering. We've never been able to do that before, but it's been a tough year on families. And I think that's something at Overstock that it's ingrained in the leadership. I believe both David and Heather mentioned, if your leadership doesn't believe it, you're never going to get there. The leaders have to understand that. And I think Heather said it best, heart and mind. You got to take the data, you got to have the stories, and there's got to be believers.
Thank you so much. Nubia, you've been so passionate about this topic. In our last 1 minute, can you just, share a few concluding thoughts with us?
Dr. Madsen, I really just want to extend appreciation to not only you, but also our panelists. There's a lot of love that's coming through the chat of just encouraging us to continue the conversation. I also want to recognize we do have representatives from the legislators on the call today. And so this is an issue that we all have to care about. It's not a gendered issue. It is an everyone's issue, but definitely a business imperative. Dr. Madsen, I also want to highlight the fact that you and I work closely on the One Utah roadmap. And someone mentioned, that this is great for the private sector, but public institutions have to make sure we're also in line with making sure we're taking care of our people. So thank you once again for inspiring me, for inspiring the folks on the call. We look forward to making sure that we give your name out like candy. So Heather, David, and Dave, be prepared to be talking to other CEOs and business leaders who are saying, we want to get started, we just don't know how. And we're going to point to you as being the rock stars who are doing the hard work. So thank you so much, Dr. Madsen, for inviting me to be with you.
Thank you, Nubia. Thank you, David and Dave and Heather. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So our second panel is titled Public Policy Progress on Childcare. And Erin Jemison is my co-moderator. She's an independent consultant focused on supporting nonprofit, government, and community organizations through policy analysis and development, legislative education, and advocacy program design and implementation, and special project facilitation. Erin, can you introduce our three panelists for this panel?
I'd be happy to. Thanks for having me this afternoon, and thank you all for being here. Really excited to introduce you all to our panelists for this session. First, I'll introduce Elizabeth Garbe, who is Senior Director of Government Relations and Public Policy at United Way Salt Lake. She's led the development and implementation of public policy agendas and lobbying strategies around many issues for a couple of decades now. And if I do say so myself, I would say that Elizabeth is the go-to advocate in Utah around early childhood education, and is really the reason that we have early learning opportunities for the most vulnerable students in our state. So thank you for your work, Elizabeth, and welcome. Thanks for being here. Second, we have Representative Susan Pulsipher, who represents District 50, the South Jordan area in Utah in the House of Representatives, having held that seat since 2017. Before running for state office, Representative Pulsipher was a member of the Jordan School District Board of Education and continues to serve the state besides in her role at the legislature through multiple committees and nonprofits. As we'll hear in today's discussion, Representative Pulsipher has also immersed herself in the world of childcare policy this past year and has really been working with her colleagues on interim committee for the past year to really craft a package of policy changes that we'll hear more about around childcare in Utah. So welcome, Representative. Thanks for joining us. And last but not least is Representative Ashlee Matthews, who joins us, also a member of the Utah House of Representatives serving District 38, which looked to me to be like Kearns, West Valley, part of West Jordan. Correct me if I'm wrong. These districts are fun to try to sum up. Representative Matthews has been with the legislature in her seat for the past year, elected in 2020, and she is also a champion for affordable childcare and other issues impacting working class families. She really hit the ground running, passed a bill her very first session, which helped alleviate childcare costs for some of the lowest income families in our state and reduced administrative burden on providers. Representative Matthews also works in the construction department of the Utah Department of Transportation and volunteers in many roles in her community. Thank you, Representative Matthews, also for taking the time to be with us today. The conversation has been really fascinating. We have our work cut out for us panelists, but I know we can do it. A lot of the questions in the chat actually had to do with policy, so attendees, keep those questions coming. I'm really excited to delve into some of this. I know we also have many childcare providers on the line with us today, and excited to get into how do we address some of the issues that folks have been putting in the chat. So first question, I'm going to start with Elizabeth and then move to Representative Pulsipher and then Representative Matthews. First question is, we've talked a little bit about people thinking maybe this is a private or a family issue. I think we're all convinced after the last panel that this is also a business issue, but is it a government issue? What role does state government and specifically lawmakers have to play in addressing the need for quality, affordable childcare in Utah? So Elizabeth, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Erin, and thank you, Susan, for having me here today. I'm really excited to be a part of this panel and to see Representative Pulsipher and Representative Matthews. I thought the first panel really did an amazing job of teeing us up to explore this issue on why it's so important for government to also be involved. At United Way of Salt Lake, we believe that in tackling any problem, you have to have everyone involved, and government is always a key partner in any solutions, and especially when it comes to childcare, because childcare is education. And in many ways, I think you can think of and see childcare similar to public education, because it's not only good for kids, but it's good for business and it's good for the economy. So it has a full circle there. So I really believe that government has a key role in helping increase access. Also ensuring quality and safety, because that's key for so many parents. They need a place for their kids to be, but they want to make sure that they're safe in whatever environment they're in, and that they're receiving quality care that they would give to their child if they were able to stay home. We also know that that childcare is really expensive, especially when you're looking at quality, that quality component. And so we have businesses, as we were just hearing, that have been offering and using it as a recruitment tool. But we have many people out there that are low-wage workers where their company isn't going to be able to do that. People that are essential to our everyday working, whether it's someone that's cleaning the building that are, you know, where we work, to people that are operating our grocery stores. So we need there to be then the government helping subsidize the cost of that care. Parents are squeezed. The research that you guys just put out showed that parents spend more on infant care than they do on a college education. And that some families are spending up to like 34% of their income on childcare. That's not sustainable. And if you're a single parent, it is that high and you don't have an option for something else. And the last thing I would say regarding that is that there is an economic impact to everyone, with not only parents being squeezed, but then our small businesses who are childcare providers being squeezed. And there was a question earlier about people leaving that sector, and they are because they're not making enough money to also take care of their own needs. And so we need to make sure that the childcare providers can stay in business because they are an essential workforce.
And in your, I'll just pop in real quick, because in the report that we'll talk about, I think a little bit more, a white paper, Marin will bring it up in the next session. Erin and Marin, who were the main co-authors, talked about childcare being a market failure. So it's so expensive, yet childcare providers live in poverty or don't make enough. So I'll throw it back to you, Erin.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Susan. Representative Pulsipher, what are your thoughts around the role that government and lawmakers in particular have to play in this issue?
First, I'd like to say how much I loved the last panel. They brought up such important issues, and I love that they're encouraging and thinking about ways that businesses can work together. And their comments about it's not a parent issue, it's a business issue, and I think it's both. I think it's in a team effort that we work together to find really the best solutions. And there were many things that they said that I looked to some of the legislation that we're looking at, ways that government can help businesses have an easier time and do a better job in trying to help their employees. This last summer, I attended a national fellowship on childcare, looking at it from a national perspective. And yes, there's the same issues are across the nation, and good solutions are being offered. We also talked through the summer with childcare providers, in-home center providers. We talked to some members of the business community, and I talked to parents. And the thing that was so interesting, almost all parents, similar to what the business people from the businesses were talking about in the last panel, many parents, when I talked to them about their childcare experience, would use the same word, and it was desperate. And I think about parents who are trying to find childcare, and parents love their children. They want what's best for them. They want a good place for the children to go. And but if there are not enough available places, they feel desperate. And often they have to choose something that they don't even feel matches their family, because children are different. Their needs are different. Families are different. Their needs are different. And so what the legislation that I'm working on was trying to do is increase the capacity, because that gives options, and also increase options. So, and just love that the business community is stepping into it, because that is an option, as they mentioned very well, that provides options that work so well for many families and many children. And so it's great. So what we were looking to do here is to try to do what government can do to help. And one of the things that we looked at is helping businesses with starting up. As they mentioned, a larger business can more easily go into this space, but small businesses said to me, we want to do it, but we can't. But if you could get a group of small businesses together, they might be able to. So one of the things we're doing in this legislation is providing startup grants. And that helps. And interestingly enough, they said, make sure you get a daycare provider to do it. Don't try to do it yourself. The startup grants actually go to that provider, because, you know, you might have space or find space, but there's a lot of things that they need to get started, supplies and you know, furniture, little desks and little chairs and so on. So there's some grants now that are going to be available to help with startup costs. We also looked at the facility. So you might have a bunch of businesses come together, but they don't have a facility. So what we're doing in this legislation is saying the development money that a city might have for redevelopment zones or for development zones, one of the acceptable uses will be daycare, a childcare facility, a place that could go into that. And that might allow some of the smaller businesses, again, to group together and have a space. Then they could get a grant, you know, to help them get up and get going and provide this for their employees. It's so interesting because as I've talked about these options, I've had municipalities and I've had school districts and so on say, well, we have that need. We want to do it too. So we think there's a lot of growth out there that could occur that would really help. We also, there's another thing that is allowing these facilities to be in TOD zones. Again, a great place. Parents could drop their kids off, ride front runner or tracks or whatever, and up to their place of employment. So there's many things in this bill. That's just a couple that I think match really well with what we heard from the first panel, and these are things government can do. So I'll let someone else have a turn.
Representative, sorry, go ahead, Susan.
Well, we're probably asking the same question. Go ahead, Erin.
What's the bill number folks are asking? Just
Yes. It's HB 15.
HB 15.
Yes.
And maybe someone can put a link to the bill in the chat, because I know that it is out. So
it is.
I really appreciate that you use the word desperate. I think a lot of what we're seeing in the chat and that I've heard from providers over the years is that really everyone in this issue is desperate. Parents are desperate. Providers themselves are desperate for to be able to do more than break even in their business, but also to be able to hire people and pay them what they're worth. And as we just heard, employers are desperate. So I just want to appreciate that. Thanks to you and Representative Matthews, the legislature is paying attention to this issue after many years of some of us kind of banging on the doors about it. So thank you for recognizing that it is reaching crisis levels and trying to help address it in different ways.
And I'm just going to add just to that, it's a very high priority with the legislature this year. So they are paying attention.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Representative Matthews, what would you like to add in terms of your role as lawmakers in addressing this need?
You know, I think they were pretty thorough in a lot of things. So I don't have much to add except just speaking for myself. I feel like my role specifically is to bring the parent perspective to the childcare conversation. A lot of the discussions at the Capitol is predominantly surrounding businesses and the economy. And of course, that's important. Everybody recognizes that that's important. But the voices of working parents have been absent from the conversation. And so, as mentioned previously by the other panelists, we are just so far behind the curve. And I know I am deep in the trenches right now. My boys are 4 and 6. I've got one in half-day preschool and one in half-day kindergarten. My husband works full-time. I work full-time, got my legislative duties. So there's so many balls that we're juggling in the air. And so I just feel like advocating from the perspective of working parents and families that are in situations similar to mine to kind of help push this conversation along, I think is where I can bring the most to the table this session. So.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to something folks were saying earlier around diversifying business, diversifying our policymakers and leaders, because you do bring that perspective, and appreciate that contributes to the conversation. Susan.
And I was going to continue with Representative Matthews. I know last year you put a related bill out, and you had done a little bit of research, I'm assuming, on past kind of policies. I don't think we've done a lot in the past, right? But any comments about those things?
I would say, well, you know, I grew up on the West Side. I've always lived on the West Side. I live in a working class neighborhood. I represent a working class district. And so the working class and West Side families have been begging for these issues to be addressed or even acknowledged for decades. And so I really feel like with COVID and the shutdowns and everything, that everybody was experiencing our issues. They weren't just West Side issues anymore. They were everyone's issues. And so now is our time to really kind of seize the opportunity while it's at the forefront of everybody's mind so that we can work to address it. People are just a lot more receptive to the concept now that childcare, elder care, the care of those with mental and physical disabilities, it is, I mean, it touches everything, business and families and things like that. So thank goodness.
Well, it's fallen on deaf ears, not all deaf ears, because we've had people like Representative Pulsipher, who's always supported such things. So we appreciate that so much. But I would like to shift back to Elizabeth on that same question. You know, you've been following this. You've been, you know, not just childcare, but early learning, which relates. They're kind of in the same bucket. You know, what has been done, you know, already? Any good things done, or any comments about kind of moving forward with the future?
Sure. So I would agree that there just hasn't been a lot done in this sphere from the policy end. And so there's a tremendous opportunity along with the tremendous need to do some big innovative things that and really make a stand that you know, I know in Utah we value children and we value family, and part of that is understanding that in valuing parents and you know, families and children is that they also need help, and that we're in this together. And so I think some of the big things that have happened more recently with some of the federal funding that's come in, and then the ability to make new investments and to expand some of the great things that we have been doing. We were on before the pandemic hit, we were on a road to increasing quality through a quality rating system. Some of that has been put on hold and has been difficult to implement through the pandemic. There's been training programs that we've been able to invest more in and expand with the additional money, whether that's the TEACH program, making sure that a lot of our providers are able to get different trainings that they need to not only help with child development, but make sure that the kids in their care are safe, because these early years are so critical and lay the foundation for lifelong learning. And it's those interactions that really do lay the groundwork for kids' future success.
Thank you so much. Erin, would you mind taking just a minute and mentioning the report that just came out last week that you and Marin Christensen really took the lead, and we had some other help?
Sure. Yeah. So I don't know if the link's been put in the chat, but we were really excited to release this report. It was really a comprehensive 50-state scan to see, okay, every state in the country is experiencing this crisis. it seems that there's more attention than ever being given. So what are other states doing, and what can Utah learn from that? And we end with some Utah specific recommendations. And speaking to what Elizabeth was just talking about, when we got into looking at what other states were doing, there was really no way around the fact that really the most fundamental investment that's been made has been from the federal government, but states have a lot of leeway in making policy decisions around how that money is distributed, what families are eligible for it, how providers are reimbursed, at what levels, et cetera. So we really tried to lay out kind of what some of those policy decisions are and how different states handle those decisions. And then we really looked at, okay, when we're looking at consumers, families who need care, as well as the providers themselves, both business owners. I love that Elizabeth referenced them as small business owners. I think we need to be referencing childcare providers as small business owners, because they are, as well as the people who work for them, the employees, the caregivers, and the businesses, the folks who need employees, and those employees need childcare. We really looked at all three of those groups and said, what are states doing? And a lot of it was tax incentives, tax credits, tax exemptions for all three of those groups when it came to childcare costs, and states stepping up and investing in this industry in the way that states often invest in other industries, to recognize that there is likely not another industry that impacts every person in a state in the way that this industry does. And that's why we're so excited to see, as Representative Pulsipher mentioned, the legislature prioritizing this.
Yeah, I just want to make sure people know of that resource, because it was a lot of work, and I'm singing to the choir, Erin, because you did a lot of that. So I also, we have a couple of other questions, but there's a lot going on in the chat and the Q&A that I have not been able to keep up with. And so Erin, are you seeing, or any of the panelists, are you seeing something you'd like to jump in and answer? We don't have to have all three of you answer every question, but would love to have you just look and see where you want to go.
I just noticed one in the chat that I just wanted to reference a little bit. And retaining and getting employees in childcare is a huge challenge, as it is in so many businesses, but it really is in childcare. And there's some things, as we've worked on this, we've found some things that we could do, but many of them didn't require legislation. So I wanted to just share those so people would know that that's out there. One of the things we thought about is if we could get maybe individuals who had a degree in education, who had selected to stay home with their children, but maybe had that desire to still interact. So we went to the Department of Education, to the state board, and they have a policy that will allow individuals who are not teaching at the time, if they work in childcare, they can use those hours to keep their certificate current. Oh. So we think that is a win-win. That's huge. And so, but that didn't require legislation, but it is something that it can be a helpful solution. So I wanted to mention that. I also wanted to mention that many people don't know that individuals who are engaged in childcare, but maybe even the non-licensed ones, can get training from this Department of Childcare. Yeah. And I'm sure that they may not know that, but there's many things so they can be a higher quality. So I just wanted to throw those two things out there.
Thank you. And we haven't mentioned yet the good work of the Office of Childcare and the Utah Department of Workforce Services that do have a lot of resources and just wonderful things to check out in terms of that. Any questions, Representative Matthews or Elizabeth, that are popping up that you'd like to respond to? Or Erin, you can pose a question from. I would like to respond to questions more than the ones we have down to make sure people.
Yeah, I want to. Sorry if either of you were going to jump in and I just beat you to it, because I'm about to ask a hard one. I just want to read one of the questions in the Q&A. I would love to offer my employees a living wage. However, I'm a childcare provider and there's no way to pay a living wage without government intervention. I'm limited on the number of children I can watch and the parents can't afford to pay more. I have a BA degree in early childhood and 20 years of experience, and I still make less than a living wage myself. I've heard this so many times, and there's no better summary of the market failure in this sector. So when it comes to childcare providers and being able to pay that living wage to their employees and themselves. Sadly, that we're not there yet. What are your policy ideas in that realm? And this is a hard one. Sorry.
Representative Matthews, do you want to?
No, she just threw you under that bus.
I mean, I have things, but some of the things I know you're going to be working on. So maybe
No,
you want.
please take it away.
Well, I would say two things about that. Yes, it is. It's a huge issue across the sector right now. And I think one of the things that we'd really love to see this next session that Representative Matthews will be working on is that we actually do a true, currently when we decide how much, the state decides how much the subsidy is going to be for childcare providers, they do a market rate assessment. Well, the unfortunate thing about that is that doesn't actually look at the true cost of care. And so if we're going to be subsidizing childcare, we really need to be subsidizing it based on the true cost of care, and understand that that we're not currently meeting that need in period. And that also there's a limit to how many hours a childcare provider is actually receives per day. So they're not even getting the full subsidy for the full hours a child might be there. Because we all know that it takes time for a parent to, they have to drop off their kid and then get to their own place of work if their childcare facility isn't in, where they're located or next door to where they live. And so, and then they also then have to leave their office and come home. And so there's those extra hours. We also, one of the things that Representative Matthews worked on last year and passed was making sure that we're paying childcare subsidies based on enrollment as opposed to attendance. And that actually, unfortunately, there's a sunset on that. So we're hoping to remove that because there is no private business that can operate by saying, yes, I will provide you service, but if you don't show up, you're not going to pay me. Like that just doesn't happen. And so we need to think about our childcare subsidies in the same way we think about private business and treat it the same, because these are private businesses that then have to suffer and cover the cost because they're not going to be able to go to that parent and ask them for that money because their kid didn't show up. So we really need to shift the way that we as government are thinking about childcare and the subsidies that are provided and how, and then not only from a childcare development perspective, but also in how we're supporting the business community. Sorry, my light keeps on going on.
Thank
So
you.
those are a few big things that I think would, and in addition to then also infusing more money into the system so that we can not only pay higher subsidies, but then expand those subsidies.
Any comments you'd like to expand on that, Representative Matthews?
Not necessarily. I in talking about the enrollment versus attendance thing, I had to have the conversation, explain my bill to my boss, and I was telling him about, if you owned an apartment complex, which he does, and you rented your apartment out, and you knew exactly how many rooms you had and what your mortgage was and what your utilities were, and you broke it out according to that, and and at the end of the month you were collecting your monthly rent, and somebody said, well, I only stayed at my apartment 2 days this month, so I don't feel like I should pay you the whole month's more. It's the same thing. And so just being able to stabilize the childcare providers and making sure that they know that, this is how much I can count on 100%, this month. If nothing else, I know that this is what I'm going to get. We'll be able to kind of keep them more stable so that they can expand and grow and accept more kids and hire more teachers and all those sort of things. So that was all my little, there's a lot of
Perfect.
here, so I think they probably get that analogy.
That's a good example, and I've been reading some of the chat, and we have people on this call that have bachelor's degrees and are making not even a living wage. And these days, you know, I hear about teachers in general leaving because they can make twice as much or whatever, and they're not getting hit. So it's such a complicated issue. Erin, I'll throw it back to you. It looks like we have about 5 minutes left. Where do you want to go?
I was just going to ask you how long we have left. So I would love to hear what you all think are some of the challenges in the legislature when it comes to talking with your colleagues and Elizabeth, not your colleagues, but your audience about childcare and what early education needs compared to, for example, the K through 12 system that they're used to hearing more about and talking more about. What are there policy opportunities there in talking with folks about the two systems and how they can be aligned better? Or do you feel like that's not a winning argument?
So I'm just going to say everybody's got 1 minute left.
Oh, okay, 1 minute.
So Elizabeth, you've got 1 minute on that.
Well, I don't want to start.
You guys are the shyest panel.
I think that's okay. So I'll say I do also want to. I'm excited about the bill that Representative Pulsipher is going to also be putting forth this year. I think that it'll, and I so appreciate both Representative Pulsipher and Representative Matthews taking on this topic that is so essential to families and to children. So I really do think that we do have some cultural attitudes towards childcare that we need to continue to work on switching and educating, not only the need for childcare that families have, but also the developmental benefit to childcare for children. And so I think that there's as Heather was talking about earlier, there's a hearts and mind aspect to all of this, and we just have a lot of talking to still do to all of their colleagues, which I look forward to helping them in talking to their colleagues about.
Who wants to go next? Final statement.
Okay, I'll just go ahead. You know, I'm pretty excited about this issue because I think the legislature is there. I think that they're listening. I have many colleagues who are pretty excited and very supportive about what we're doing. And as I mentioned, leadership is very supportive. So in the past, we haven't talked about it a lot. We haven't done much, but I think we're there, and I think we're ready to act and do some things. And what in my bill that I have, it doesn't solve every problem, but it's a really good start. And I think it is the beginning of great work for the future.
I love the optimism. That helps my heart. So, and any final comments from you, Representative Matthews?
Sure. I just want to, well, first of all, just piggyback on everything that the other two said, because I feel like we're all on the same page. I'm hoping that this is the first of many conversations and a lot of, you know, legislation and panels and whatever to kind of address this. I feel like the window of time that these services are necessary is just so small compared to the timeline of a child's full educational career. And so we spend a lot of time sort of triaging that in the end later in life. And I feel like if we can just invest more time and more energy and resources to the beginning of a child's education, we're going to be able to mitigate a lot of these issues that we're seeing later on. And we're going to be able to, I don't know, just kind of see how that's paying off in the end. And so I'm hoping that, as Representative Pulsipher said, that even though predominantly in Utah, childcare has been considered a woman's issue, which, you know, don't throw tomatoes at me, it's a thing. But because a lot of our colleagues are men and they are in a different stage of life, I feel like they are listening, and we can switch from them thinking of this as a cost and kind of have them thinking it is more of an investment. So
I love that. Thank you so much. Erin, you want to finish us off? Any final statement?
Yeah, I just really want to thank you all, Representative Matthews. I'm so glad you connected to kind of deferring some of the costs and issues that we spend so much time trying to put fires out around later in people's lives. I think that's a really good point. And I will say, Representative Pulsipher, when I was listening to your committee talk about this issue month after month during interim, I was just so excited. I share your optimism in this conversation. Not just happening at the legislature. I think there's been attempts at having it happen, but with such depth and really looking at the issue comprehensively on behalf of families as well as providers and employers. So thank you all for being here. I'm really excited to, as you've said, kick Utah off down this road of really starting to address this crisis for folks. So thanks for having me as well. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you so much to all four of you. Thank you. We'll move ahead and move into our last panel. Our final panel for this symposium is titled Childcare Challenges, Strategies and Solutions. And my co-moderator is Marin Christensen, who I don't have to look at her bio because she is the Associate Director for the Utah Women and Leadership Project, where she focuses really on research and strategy and events that impact and empower women. And so I'm going to throw it to you, Marin, to introduce our three panelists for this last panel.
Thank you, Susan. I'm so very honored to welcome and hear from this panel today. Gabriella Archuleta is the Public Policy Director at YWCA Utah, where she seeks equitable policies that are critical to the health, safety, empowerment, and economic advancement of Utah women and girls, and is a longtime advocate for justice and equality for marginalized communities. Paige Checketts is a co-founder and executive director of the Utah Childcare Cooperative, or UC3. UC3 seeks innovative solutions for increasing access for affordable quality childcare in Utah. And Paige's story is great because she's a trained nurse that also experienced this decades ago. She had to leave the workforce to do caretaking, and she's seeing this happen to her own family. So just seeing the problem never go away, and she's really driven to help solve it. And then we have Anna Thomas. She is a senior policy analyst with Voices for Utah Children, where she works on issues related to early childhood care and education, as well as juvenile justice reform. And Anna came to Voices after 10 years with the ACLU of Utah. And I know from experience that all three of these women understand and are committed to improving childcare landscape in Utah. And they're all actively moving needles to ensure change in various capacities. So we are very, very happy to welcome them and hear their ideas on childcare challenges, strategies, and innovative solutions. And we'll start with kind of the provider perspective. And I encourage childcare providers to continue to tell your stories in the chat. I think they're so important. But let's just talk about what we've heard from providers we work with. How are childcare businesses functioning? What are their prospects for success and sustainability right now? And I'll throw it to Anna first, and then the rest of you can chime in.
Thank you, Marin. I'm so happy to be with you all today and so energized by the conversations so far. It's great to hear so much cohesion and agreement on the urgency of this issue and an appreciation of the complexity of what's going on here. I think, you know, what David Alsop said early on in the conversation about childcare being a human issue is absolutely true through and through. Humans run childcare. Thank goodness they're around our children all day. Humans make childcare high quality or low quality. So without people working in the field, loving, caring for kids, protecting them, there's no childcare to talk about. I want to be really clear when we talk about how businesses are functioning, how childcare is impacted, what the sustainability is right now. It is important to note that across Utah, things can be very different from setting to setting. It is important to talk to a lot of different providers because circumstances are very different in rural communities, urban communities, family childcare, center-based childcare. Some childcare centers have made news because they've closed. That's often connected to not being able to find enough qualified workers. And then some have more business than they know what to do with. They have wait lists, as was mentioned earlier by Heather. And so depending on where you're going in the state, you're going to see something a little bit different. I have heard, and I am by no means a childcare professional. I'm an erstwhile babysitter. That's about the best I can offer. But without the federal COVID money that's been mentioned in the previous conversation, we would be in much worse circumstances. So many childcare businesses are functioning because they've had the support from federal funding to keep their, for example, childcare center open, even though it's operating at 30% capacity for a variety of different reasons, sick families, families working from home, so that those 30% of their kids can still get care, even though in no way do the numbers work out for the business owner. I really appreciate what Representative Pulsipher said earlier about the workforce issues in childcare. In some ways, it is like what we're seeing in other industries. In some ways, it is not like what we're seeing in other industries. You can go to the mall and it's very upsetting to see stores closed intermittently, restaurants that are just shut down different days of the week. We are inconvenienced by restaurants and clothing shops being closed. We cannot work when childcare settings are closed. And we all know that painfully from earlier in the pandemic when all the schools were closed and suddenly people did not have access to some of the highest quality childcare that people can find for free through public education, quite frankly. So I think childcare businesses are functioning well right now in that human beings are making just incredible personal sacrifices for the kids and the families that they serve. And that's not something that we have the right to rely on forever. A lot of people are at their wits' end. They're trying to keep their businesses afloat. They're trying to expand them. The numbers didn't work out before COVID, and now it's even less tenable with all of the stresses and the trauma that have built up among families and among providers over the last 2 years. So I would say, not to be the doomsayer, but without substantial and dramatic intervention at this point, we're not talking about prospects for success. We're not even talking about prospects for sustainability. We're talking about how to manage the crumbling of one of the most important and invisible sectors in our economy. So I'm simultaneously very hopeful because this is a sector that is just filled with incredible individuals who are doing this out of the goodness of their hearts in a lot of senses and out of their love for children and the families that they serve. But I'm feeling very scared for the parents who rely on those providers. I'm very scared for the providers themselves because what we are doing right now is just not sustainable.
Paige or Gabriella?
Oh, amen. Amen to that. And Anna, your enthusiasm and emotional capacity just really stirs me. And so many people have said things today that I'm just on fire with it. I'm just going to add one little thing that nobody's talked about today and is something that I think would help matters. We need to do all these things, P.S. There isn't one of these things that we need to pick on and focus on. Like, everybody needs to do everything that has been suggested for us to even survive, to keep this industry in survival mode. The one thing that I want to bring up is pipeline development. So we talk about, employment being a big problem for providers right now, and you can get low-level, entry-level employees to come and work for your center. You have to pay them a lot more than you had to in the past, right? Competition is so great right now that it's really a problem for providers. I know that, and we've talked about that. But then I'm also thinking about like director level care and people wanting to start their own childcare business. We want them to have some kind of education, whether it's a childhood education degree or a business degree, something like that, to help them be more sustainable, to survive in this tough environment. And so I just think that if we could get our higher education programs to support some better pipeline development, to get our legislators to support something that encourages pipeline development, something along those lines where we can get people into the field and trained in a proper way so that they can stay in the field and really make a difference and grow their businesses and such. But in order to do that, people have to be attracted to it, and their love of children is wonderful, but it's not enough. They also have to have the wages.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madsen. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real honor to be here with you all. I am bringing the private nonprofit perspective at the YWCA Utah. We are known primarily as a domestic violence shelter, but a lot of people don't realize that we have extensive childcare services on our campus. And we are an organization that seeks to empower women and families and eliminate racism. And we really see childcare as a tool for equity. We offer quality childcare, preschool and kindergarten for working families through our Lowly Eccles Early Education Center. And then for the residents who live on campus, we also have our drop-in childcare center, before and after school programs, and summer programs. So this childcare crisis is something that we have been living, and our leadership and our staff are dedicated to serving the families and children. And we've done a great job adapting, but I really want to talk about the realities of what's going on. We've only been able to remain open because our staff are making incredible sacrifices. In our childcare centers, our staff are working overtime, often 10-hour shifts. Sometimes they miss lunch. Our staff who are parents worry about what happens if they or their children get sick. And unfortunately, there have been times where our own staff haven't been able to care for their own children or their family needs because they're showing up for work at our organization. And we are consistently running about 4 to 6 staff members short. And our directors have been stepping into the classroom and working primarily as teachers instead of their administrative positions. So the demand for our services continues to be really high, like everywhere else. Our infant classroom has a 2-year wait list, and we have at least a wait list of 10 children in almost all of our classes. And just like Representative Pulsipher had mentioned, desperate is the word that has been used to describe the current situations. We simply can't sustain this. We can't continue to put this burden on our staff, but they are the reason that we are continuing to function the way that we are.
Thank you so much. Paige, I wanted to come back to you real quick. Gabe told us a little bit about the YWCA. Can you just do a 1-minute overview of UC3 and what you provide? It was mentioned in the first panel today because Ultradent is using those services, but you're a nonprofit. Tell us just a little bit more about it.
Sure. Our mission at UC3 stands for the Utah Childcare Cooperative, and our mission is to expand and improve childcare throughout the state. And we kind of have focused on helping employers do that through creative, different ways to on-site childcare. So that's how we know David Alsop, and have been working with Ultradent and some other companies as well. But yeah, the idea is to create childcare centers in business centers, business areas where more than one business can participate, so that small businesses, let's say you're a Chick-fil-A right next to Ultradent, and the karate class, the karate teacher, like let's say that all 3 of those companies need childcare. Well, if there's one childcare close by, then everyone can participate, and it's not a heavy burden on one company.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to stay with you, and then move to Gabe, and then Anna, I'll have you last on this next question. But just a few thoughts. You've been in the panel, you've heard panel 1, panel 2, here's panel 3. What are your thoughts on interventions that community leaders, public policy or business leaders or other leaders should be advocating for? A few thoughts that come to mind that haven't been addressed or brought out.
Yeah, we really need to have these conversations in all levels, in all areas, especially developers that are developing business parks and communities, housing developments. They all need to include this critical piece of infrastructure. And if they do, and if they add some component of subsidy to it, then it's going to start building. We're going to start seeing magical things happen, but everybody's got to do their part. So we've had some really great conversations in Salt Lake County and Utah County with city developers and other business leaders, and really tried to push that message that everybody's got to include childcare as an essential infrastructure piece for a healthy community. So those are the conversations that we need to keep having.
Thank you. And Gabe, your main job is public policy, right? So any other things that you would throw in there about public policy or other community interventions?
Yeah, well, I really want to see a state and a nation that doesn't think twice about providing a supportive childcare infrastructure to families and businesses. We're not there yet. And our solutions really need to meet the moment and realities of working families. Wages are not rising with inflation. They're not keeping up with inflation. We can't expect them to be raising or going up significantly anytime soon. Housing prices are continuing to rise, and many families are no longer going to receive the monthly child tax payments that have made an incredible difference in their lives. And so childcare is one area that we can really alleviate this burden that people are feeling, so that we can create an environment where everybody feels a sense of security. That's what we're missing right now. Children need security from their parents and caregivers. The parents and caregivers need job security, and childcare centers and businesses need a workforce that can show up. So something that we want to move to at the YWCA, for example, is to create a center where our staff can access it, where it's affordable enough so our residents can access it, and model something like the businesses we're talking about earlier, where it's one of the base benefits that we are able to provide in a sustainable way. And I think that we also need to acknowledge that, like I said before, investing in childcare infrastructure is creating a tool for equity. Women of color are largely overrepresented in the childcare workforce, and they are often some of the lowest paid workers, which is something that we have discussed on other panels and in other areas, but we need to use it also as a tool to increase living wages for folks.
Thank you so much. And Anna, I'd love your thoughts. And then Marin, I'm sure are you keeping up with the chat and the Q&A? It's blown up, I know, on this issue. And so I think we'll respond to some of those questions next. And Marin, you're in charge of those because I'm distracted. I'm easily distracted though. Anna.
Me too. I'm just texting my fellow panelists about how amazing they are right now. And I feel like we could capture what's in the chat for a second brief to complement the amazing white.
We actually, just so you know, we do save the chats, and we'll email everybody after, everybody that's RSVP'd will get an email, and we'll share those things. So just so you know.
Yeah, that's where a lot of the really good information is. I really appreciated what Representative Pulsipher said earlier, using that word desperate, which Erin reiterated. And I think, the reality is that moms and dads go to bed worried about where they're going to drop their kids off tomorrow, whether they're going to be able to make it to work, if they're going to be able to afford their childcare bill. And that just is not something that we should be forcing families to go through. So what Gabe was saying about those kind of building that infrastructure, I think that really is the major goal right now, is to invest in that. I mean, and again, I think this is why COVID made this issue so salient for so many people and made it so unignorable so that Representative Pulsipher could get this awesome bill together. But like, imagine if instead of like worrying about whether we can get our kids through school or, you know, which school our kids are going to go to, or are they going to graduate from high school on time, we suddenly were worried about whether the school was going to be open, which a lot of parents are dealing with right now, and how we were going to pay for it. That's what everybody who has to use childcare deals with all the time. And I think that that kind of dramatic issue does require dramatic interventions. And there are lots of great like innovations that we've explored here in Utah. Some have come to fruition, some haven't. Shared Service Alliance would be something that could really help out childcare providers, where they'd be able to realize some economies of scale, pool health insurance, you know, save money on different materials and food. That would help. I think, you know, having a more expansive friends, family, and neighbor program. If you have somebody in your family or your neighborhood who's consistently watching your kids and you qualify for a government subsidy, technically, you should be able to pay them to watch your children. That is a viable program. There are a few hoops to jump through, but it's not excessive. It's really underutilized in Utah. I think some other states have explored some wage supplementation and like compensation structures, similar again to what we see with public employees, to ensure that the people who are caring for kids are incentivized to stay in the industry and receive the kind of compensation that they deserve. And then one more thing I wanted to mention, because I don't think we think about it enough as a childcare issue, although some of our business leaders did mention it obliquely. Having generous paid family leave for people when they adopt kids or give birth. We know that infant and toddler care is the most expensive to provide, and it's the most expensive and hard to find for parents. I think Representative Pulsipher said to me once, like, the best ratio you can get in childcare is 1-to-1, right? Pay your employees to stay home for the first 6 to 12 months with their kids. It sounds excessive, but we know what strengths that time bonding has. And that can be part of the answer to that kind of support for families who maybe aren't ready to go back to work, to just give them the option of staying home longer with their kids.
And just want to pitch in real quick that there's a lot of different options. Sometimes we say it's all or nothing, but there's groups that do full paid, but their employee just comes back part-time for a couple of months, but they're still paid for full-time. So there's some interesting transitions. Marin, I'm over to you where do you want to go?
Anna, Anna, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention one thing really quick, because Dr. Madsen, you reminded me. In the earlier panel, there was discussion about women being passed up for positions because they were pregnant. Just wanted to make sure we're all on the same wavelength here. That is patently illegal. That's not like a sad thing that happens to ladies. That's literally against the law. So if that happens to you, complain.
I'm glad you said that, because it is absolutely illegal. Marin, over to you.
Anna, I'm staying with you real quick, just because we're reading the chat, hearing issues providers and parents are experiencing, some really good policy ideas. The fact that without the PPP funding, some childcare providers will go under. We're going to be facing an even bigger crisis. I want to ask how everyone can get involved and use their voice as the legislative session is about to begin. That said, I understand childcare providers and parents of young children just have the least amount of free time in order to put their energy and emotion into this. Just, are there any opportunities, any easy ways that those listening that the people you know and that you can spread this information, how they can lend their voices and experiences and get involved?
That's a really great thing to point out. working parents and overburdened childcare providers and early educators are sort of strapped for time when it comes to interacting with their elected officials. I do think the other benefit of COVID is that there are even more remote possibilities for involvement. And I have been just amazed at the people who have found time somehow in their days to read policy briefs, follow the news, contact their legislators. I would encourage every childcare provider who is able to invite and host their legislator in their childcare setting, and that 100% goes for home-based childcare providers. Make them come to you, right? That may not be possible during the legislative session, but there's a whole lot of time in between sessions where it can happen. Email them, call them, let them know who you are, let them know you're a small business owner. And I would say too, there's been a lot of talk during this conversation about sort of this way that we've been approaching childcare, where it's just like the problem of individuals, right? Like this family can't get it together, this mom can't get things figured out. And I think there is strength in numbers. I had a great conversation before Christmas with a couple of young women who are in the real estate development area, and they were reaching out for ideas about how to advocate for incentives for developers. I just sent her over to Paige because they themselves were experiencing childcare issues. And I think for sometimes it's hard for parents to speak up and say, this is a problem, because it feels like an individual family failure. But emailing your legislators and saying, this is absolutely a problem, I need help, we need help. And I would say too, probably one of the biggest opportunities we've seen, definitely in my lifetime, yep, it was before my lifetime that we had another crack at this, is some proposals before Congress right now. A huge federal reform potential with investment that could help with compensation, helping parents meet the cost of childcare, improving quality, and it's not going to be perfect, and it's going to be a lot of work to implement, but I think childcare providers and working parents are invested in doing something, because what we have right now is so unsustainable. So I would say contact your federal legislators as well. Just tell them your story and how frustrated you are. Heather was absolutely right. Stories speak to the heart. You are always an expert in your own story and experience. So even if you have 5 minutes to dash off an email to your legislator at 9 o'clock at night, I would advocate that you go for it.
And I would suggest you also talk to your employer. Sometimes we talk to business leaders and we say, this is a really big problem in our community. And they're like, oh, we don't really hear about it. It's not really a problem here. And I think there is a stigma and a fear of sharing those personal experiences with your employer. But tell your employer, tell them to contact UC3. Tell them that you're having struggles and that you need more support and more help around this issue. Let them know so that they can advocate. Like Representative Pulsipher said, sometimes, I think she said it, the business leaders have a strong voice with the legislature. And so if they can go to bat for you there too, that's very helpful. So those are my thoughts.
I wanted to give Gabriella the chance to answer if you wanted to.
Well, I don't remember the question, but I do have a few things that I wanted to add just to the discussion about what we can do going forward. Recently, when there was an article about Domo CEO talking about millions of dollars of economic incentives that the state offers tech companies, my first thought was, what if we had millions of dollars of economic incentives for childcare providers, families, and businesses to keep childcare professionals and working families employed? We need that level of investment that is going to other sectors. Something else that I wanted to point out is we need to correct a poorly made policy decision from 2008 when the legislature prohibited undocumented families from being licensed for in-home care. Our state lost 750 providers. That doesn't necessarily mean that they stopped providing care, but they no longer were licensed. So we have to acknowledge that biases are coming into this conversation, and we can't let that hamper our ability to create a strong childcare infrastructure. And we cannot exclude or separate and ignore solutions that includes everyone. And immigrants, regardless of their status, they're largely working in first responder roles in restaurants and healthcare settings and schools. Many of them do have legal status, and many are in mixed status families where there's one or more US citizen children. And some of these policies end up really harming these US citizen children and all the kids that are growing up in our community. So we cannot allow anti-immigrant bias to get in the way of ensuring these solutions include all families. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on something that Representative Pulsipher had mentioned, and that's investing in early childcare as a career and treating childcare workers as professionals through the pay that matches their skill and knowledge. This is not just full-time babysitting work. They are doing, they're having such an impact on the development of early minds. And so I'd like to see us make that mindset shift to look at it as a career and value teachers like we value early education teachers like we value other teachers.
You know, you brought up something that was kind of inferred in a couple of comments, but and most people on here are probably childcare providers and people that know already, but we can't forget the conversation on the importance of brain development and social development and everything of those early years. You know, I'm watching, I have a 5-year-old grandson and a almost 2.5, 3-year-old granddaughter who's this little girl. I just watch her every time and she is like, all this information is coming in and everything is affecting her. And when you have really great people who love her and spend time with her, I mean, it helps your brains. And when we don't prepare our children, we look at it as babysitting. It's so much more than babysitting, right? It's so much more. So I appreciate those thoughts. It looks like we have just a couple minutes left. I have one other question. Marin, am I good, or do you have a burning question? Well, I just wanted to see if Paige wanted to make any more comments about developers and land like impact fees and shared service alliances, and just we haven't really talked about that much. So do you have any quick
Yeah, I can't remember. Somebody did mention TOD funding, which is transit-oriented development. That's an important resource that we haven't taken advantage of here. So what that is it's funding, federal, state funding that we can use to develop things that are crucial for our economy to thrive. And we do it in a place that's close to transit. So along the front runner route, we create some childcare so that people on their way to work can stop, drop off their kids. That's a great tool that we haven't even touched. We've done other things with TOD funding, but not childcare. It needs to be talked about. And then, incentivizing developers. So we've worked with Ivory Homes a little bit, and they've tried to get to get land and then include a childcare center instead of a workout room or amenities that have typically in the past attracted people. They're looking at attracting people with childcare centers for their housing developments. That's just brilliant. Like that's what Heather was talking about. 83% of millennials today are looking for those kind of amenities more than anything else. They're needing support. So those are the kind of things that I'm thinking of. Is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's time to do a few questions at the end, but before that, I want to, someone sent me a quote from an article that Anna was quoted saying, tinkering around the edges of a completely broken system is not going to create long-term solutions. I thought tinkering around the edges was a great way, and that's what sometimes we've done. Marin, just in 1 minute, do you want to conclude? Any final thoughts from you, because you're an expert in this area as well?
Just that's true. We can't be looking at this as a Band-Aid to what we've experienced during COVID, because it was a crisis beforehand. And I think the white paper just really does a good job in showing how complex it is. And we do give policies to address each of those little complexities, but it really is an overarching kind of solution that needs to happen. And I'm so glad that perspective shifts are beginning, and it's just really important that we continue these conversations and be vocal, and we need our men leaders to be vocal about this, and we're very happy to have two in our first panel speak so great on the childcare issue. Just let's really gear up the leaders we know in our communities to continue to speak about this, and especially regarding the perspective of the undervalued labor that is being provided by underpaid childcare providers. That's really all I want to say. I'm just really glad that the perspective is changing.
Thank you, Marin and Dave and Paige and Anna. I would like to have everybody, we're right on time. I wanted 10 minutes at the end. We've all done really good on keeping us on time. I'd love to invite everybody else to put their cameras back on. And hopefully you have been watching the chat, because I have been distracted a little bit and not done as well today. So I would love to have all of you, including the moderators, whoever's left. I know a couple of people had to leave. Would love, I'm going to call this lightning round right at the end. So I would love to have anybody that is seeing a question that we haven't, if you've been here the whole 2 hours almost, that we haven't addressed, and in like 30 seconds, a minute at the most, if you can give a response to that. So who wants to start? You first, panelists. On panel one, you've had some time to think, but anybody can start. Maybe just raise your hand or yeah, just let me know.
Susan, I'll just make a comment, and hopefully it answers questions, but I just think we need more diversity and power, where decisions are made, where policy is made, where society is shaped. And so long as there's a lack of representation and power, we're going to continue to make societal level and public policy decisions that don't reflect the membership of society. And so I ask myself, how can I influence who's in power?
I love that. And we're talking, Heather, I know you're talking about, I speak about this quite a bit in my work, but we're talking about women and people of color, but we're talking about power. I mean, business power of, that CEOs, top leadership teams, also getting more supportive folks, including women in the state house and Senate, in city councils, in nonprofits, in schools and universities. Yeah, isn't that what you're talking about? Like all parts of society?
And boards of directors,
yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. Who else would like to jump in?
Susan, I can
Great.
I can just share some thoughts. Just watching the chat and interacting with some of the panelists, it's been a little bit emotional, because I grew up in this state, and I left it for business reasons, and I came back because I really wanted to help. But the fact that someone had to point out something that I shared that I didn't realize I needed to point out, that it's illegal to not hire a woman that's pregnant, is shocking. And the fact that it still happens tells a lot about the fact that there's still pockets in this state and the business environment that needs to mature and grow and be educated. And I totally agree. It's the diversity that needs to change in the decisions at the top. And there's ways you can build that and grow that. And you just need to put focus on that. The only other thing I had is I'm realizing the connection between business and government right now. Government needs our help, and we need government's help. And if we can partner together to influence this conversation, we can shine a light on it to have influence for change and sustaining that change. So thank you for the opportunity today.
Thank you. Dave, do you have, since we're going through that first panel, do you have some thoughts?
Yes, I would echo what Heather brought up right out of the gate as a summarizing statement. Diversity inclusion is everything this is about. And if you don't have diversity of leadership, of thought, your organization is not going to move to this level fast enough. And it starts at the board. We at Overstock have refaced our board of directors with talent and diversity, and done the same thing at our most senior executive level. Not only that, but our CEO, a large portion of our quarterly board meetings are spent on these topics, non-business results related topics regarding diversity and inclusion, and hiring people into our organization to help us think about it. Sometimes we don't intend to end up where we are because of who we're surrounded by. And you really need to push the thinking. And it starts with change of thought leadership. And I just appreciate Heather's comment there and couldn't support it enough.
Thank you. And Nubia, I want to just mention that one of the things, Nubia and I work together closely, but one of her passions is to really make sure that state government follows, provides an example of the same kinds of things, because what a workforce that is, right? I don't know how many employees, aren't we like, isn't it 20,000 or something?
Close to 30,000 individuals. So it's one of the largest employers in the state. And so again, if we are trailing behind on some of these family-friendly policies, how are we showing up for not only our employees, but then also helping inspire individuals in the business sector to lead out? And so this is a phenomenal conversation. Dr. Madsen and I have a meeting with Governor Cox, Lieutenant Governor, tomorrow during our equality and opportunity discussion. And, we will be absolutely talking about this, and not only the support, but also the desire to make sure that these policies are advocated for during this legislative session. But to your point, our legislators are key here. They are in so many ways the ones that frame the policies in the state. And so if we can, again, strengthen relationships, create conversations, make sure that, there is balanced and thoughtful, considerate, humane, compassionate discussions that are being had so that we can encourage the change that is needed. That's really where we need to move in that direction. So thank you again, Dr. Madsen, for a phenomenal conversation. A lot of love coming through the chat, and I'm humbled by the leaders on this call. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Erin, any quick comments from you?
I just think it's critical to recognize that this is an issue that impacts, I said it earlier, I can't think of an issue that impacts more people than this one. I don't have children, I'm not a child care provider, and I'm not a business owner. And yet I teared up multiple times during this conversation thinking about the people in my life whose quality of life and opportunities were limited because of their lack of access to child care. And I personally love to work on issues where everybody agrees that things need to be addressed, and that we can work across the political spectrum, across our different experiences to do that. So thank you all for being here, and please stick with us and keep participating in these conversations, because they're so important to the future of our state.
So we're not going to get around to everyone, but Representative Pulsipher, you've been mentioned many times about your policy. Any quick thoughts here at the end?
I just wanted to say that I think sometimes we look to government to solve all our problems, and really the best solutions come when we work together. I love the business taking a lead on this and doing what they can do, and we can do some things to help them. And when we work together in the nonprofits, that's when we get the best solutions.
I love that. I'm going to go ahead and conclude us. I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Utah Education Network, the John M. Huntsman School of Business, and USU Extension for making this event possible. I appreciate so much each of you, and I know a few had to drop off already, being here and participating. All of you panelists and moderators, thanks so much. And thank you to everyone. Have a wonderful day.